the good thing here, compared to a lot of Western markets, I find, is it still changes very quickly. So opportunities in China come and go very fast. So you have to be very agile, I would say. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of business is done across the dining table, or it's not done across a boardroom table. So coming here, interacting with people, seeing how they live, understanding what their drivers are, and then being able to react to that, I think is very important.
Welcome to my podcast, Ian. First, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on today. So my name is Ian Mote. I'm from the UK, from London originally, but I've spent the last 21 years living in Asia. I spent some time in Hong Kong, spent some time in Dubai, but I spent the last 15 years living here in China, in Shanghai. So this is very much my home now, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about it today.
You have lived for 15 years in China, and you worked as a finance professional in China. But next to your professional career, you also have written 2 books, and the first book called From Chicken Feet to Christ's Bath, One Englishman's Travel in China. You published this book in 2015, and 5 years after you wrote another book, Ginger in Her Socks. Very interesting name. We will get into it later on. It's, the subtitle is One Englishman's Parenting in China. So what inspired you to write these 2 books?
I think the writing comes from, it's a very internal thing. It's just, I used to write travel stories when I first came out here and tell people what I've been doing, and people seemed to like them and enjoyed some of the scrapes and the problems I found myself in. So I sort of expanded them over time, and it was a bit of a bucket list item, or something I always wanted to do, is try and expand that and see if I could write a book. So when I had the idea for the first one, it was sparked by the fact that I'd been to, I think, sort of 23 out of 31 provinces in China at that time. So I realized I could maybe try and target going to every province in China, and that would be the hook then for writing a book about it and telling the stories of all the places that I've been to. So once I got that, it's something that really sort of burns within you. Then I had that idea, and I was like, yes, this is something I want to do. It wasn't a trivial hobby. It wasn't a work in any way. It was something that once I had that idea, it just felt a very natural thing to do. So I wrote that book. I was very happy with the way it came out, and then having enjoyed the process and still wanting to continue writing, I thought over the next couple of years, what else can I talk about, or what's my experience now? The first book was about my life in China, traveling a lot and learning about the country. And now I've been here a bit longer. They don't have quite so many surprising incidents or quite so many events in that format. So I was looking to do something else. But the biggest change in my life, or the biggest influence in my life over that time, was that I became a father at the end of 2016. So then it became a story about that. And maybe being a parent on its own isn't enough to tell, but the issue then was that I'm obviously from the UK, but living in China. My wife's Chinese, and so it was raising a child with some Western influences and some Chinese influences, and some conflicts and some benefits that had. And I found that was pretty fertile ground in terms of now to tell more stories and finding more opportunities to write. So the second one was driven from that.
We will get into your second book in a minute, but about your first book, it's quite a thick book, and you have very busy job. You're traveling around. How was the writing process, and to put all of your words on the pages?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, it took probably a couple of years to write it all down. The way I was doing it really then was just every time something happened, or every time I had a story to tell, I'd try and sit down and write that story. And I wrote quite a lot. I used to write quite a lot on a Sunday afternoon, sitting at home. But also then I was traveling a lot and spending a lot of time on flights, traveling to different Chinese cities. So I found sort of you could get half an hour, an hour's writing done on a plane when you couldn't really do any work anyway. So that became quite a good thing. And that was just long enough to write one story or one section. And then at the end, once I put a lot of these down, the process then was about trying to meld them all together, put it into a more coherent narrative, and find out which bits worked, which bits didn't need to be or need to be extended. But as I said in the first question, this was something, it was something of a labor of love for me. So it never really felt like a problem. That became my hobby. It's something I have spare time, I'll go and write down for 10 minutes. Or I had a list of all the bits I wanted to cover. So anytime I had spare time, I'd sit and write one more till I got through the list.
Great to hear how you manage this writing process, because it's a travel story. I think also it can be also enjoyable to go back to relive the memories and to travel again in your mind and to write it. Did you experience such kind of reliving the experiences?
A little bit, yes. I mean, every so often I go look back, maybe to prepare for an interview like today, or I've done a couple of talks over the years, so I go back and revise the stories. It's always nice to look back and to remember some of the places and some of the stories. And then I think that applies particularly to the second one because it's my memories of bringing up my daughter, and that's a good. It's a good record for me to have all the things we did, particularly when she was young, and some of the stories and events that happened around that. So I think the second one in particular is good for that because it's almost like a full record of the first few years of her life, which is quite a valuable thing to have, I think.
I can really imagine because I read this book. It's very interesting, also very personal,
Mm.
and because it's really about your personal life, your life with your wife, with your daughter, and all of the IEs and the family members in your house. And you also you have written it with a lot of humor. I must say, I laughed a lot along the
Okay,
way, even in the most
thanks.
stressful moments. And you put some humorous lines between the story. So I was feeling the stress, but I need to laugh for a moment. And it's really well done. It's really an interesting story. And but in how did you come up with the title "Ginger in Her Socks"?
The title for the second one, The Ginger in Her Socks, is, well, I mean, the titles for both, I was trying to look at the different extremes about things that happen in China or situations that I wasn't expecting. And the second one was because one of our IEs, when our daughter Kira got sick, that was her traditional Chinese remedy. So she put ginger in Kira's socks as a way to get rid of a cold that she had. And I looked this up, and I understand that ginger is quite effective as a remedy if it's ingested into the body. It's got quite good antitoxin properties, but that's usually in a soup or in a drink or eating it. But I never quite worked out how putting it in her socks was supposed to get it into her body more effectively than drinking it in a soup. So I was trying to think of what were the strange situations I'd seen um, that that would work for a title, and that was the one that came up as much as anything else. So yeah, that was why I went for that one in the end.
Yeah, did the ginger really help in the end?
I mean, she got better in the end. I don't know if it was any quicker because the ginger. I wouldn't put any money on it. So, but you
So
never know.
yeah,
You never know.
you never know the magical power of ginger in the socks.
Could be, yes. But I've looked it up
Yeah.
online. I've never found. I did check, and I've not managed to find anybody else who swears this is a good thing. So it was only our old IE who thought it. So I'm not expecting
Yeah.
that it was particularly effective.
Yeah, but it's really intriguing title. It's very nice, and I was immediately intrigued by the title when I read it. And in this book, you have written, yeah, your life story with Kira, with Heidi, your wife, and it's also a kind of journey. I felt that I traveled with you to all kinds of places, and the whole journey of getting Kira, and also to build this family life,
Mm.
especially after the birth of Kira, you got a lot of support from your mother-in-law and from two IEs, nanny living in your house. So as the only man in the
Mm.
house, you almost you almost couldn't get the chance to get close to Kira because everybody really wanted to take good care of her, and they because you are a man, you are not well trained father yet, so they didn't really trust you to let you take care of Kira. And how was this process? Because as an Englishman, if you think about living in the UK, it's really unthinkable. And how did you survive as an Englishman in the first year?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was an interesting cultural difference that I hadn't really expected. But yeah, I mean, getting used to having an IE, I think maybe for people who are outside of China, they wouldn't know. So here you can hire an IE, which is a nanny, and she was with us at least 6 days a week and staying overnight as well. So you have a lot of extra help when your baby is young, which is great. Um, I took that originally to think, well, maybe she can help train me and show me what to do and teach me what I need to be doing to looking after her. Whereas I think a lot of the eyes come in saying, well, this is my job. I've been hired to look after this baby, so I'm going to look after this baby, and you can go and sit over there, and I'll call you when I need you. And then, so obviously, when the baby's very young, she's very close to her mother as well. And then we had my mother-in-law staying with us at the same time. So early on, I was like third or fourth in line to look after her sometimes. So yeah, I had to fight my way in or elbow my way in sometimes to get to look after her because I don't know this is um, a particularly common thing here, or maybe just the way it worked out in our house. But if I could have sat on the edges and not done very much, and no one would have seemed to have been particularly bothered. Whereas, yeah, I know a lot of Western couples with babies, or even here, and their attitude is very different. The father is very much expected to take responsibility and be in there early. So, but I did get involved in the end, and I think the way to work it a lot of the time was to ask the IE or to ask my mother-in-law to say, hey, can you train me? Can you show me what to do? So they're still involved and they're still uh, giving out their wisdom, but at the same time, they teach me what to do, and then it gives them a bit more comfort and a bit more of a safety net then so I built up slowly from the start, and then as time went on, they got more and more comfortable, and then I got more and more used to it. So it was less and less of an issue. But then it was quite nervous. I remember the first time I took Kira out on my own, and it was like, you're looking for danger on every corner, or you're worried about anything that could go wrong. But it was fine. No, we didn't have any issues. So it was good, and I think it was important to build a strong relationship early, and I think I'd like to think I did that. So I think that stood me in good stead for the future and even to where we are now. Yeah.
Certainly, and I read in your book how you really engaged with Kira, and although you are the fourth of the fourth person in the line, you still tried all of the in her to play a very important role in her life, and go to all kinds of playgrounds and go to school and all kinds of places. Sometimes as the only father around, and to get really involved in Kira's life. I think that's really very important for all of the daughters to have a engaging and involved father to be really a very important part of their lives. And in throughout your parenting journey, in China, you also navigated the processes of funding the kindergartens and schools for your daughter, and you also describe that in your book, and it's so different. And can you share with us the major differences you observed between Chinese education and the education system you experienced in UK?
I can, although it was a long time ago when I was at school there, so I think it's probably changed a lot. It was interesting here that I suppose one of the big differentials is that a lot of the educational establishments, even kindergartens, are very much divided as international or local. So, we didn't qualify for the local kindergarten, so we had to go to an international one. And then at that time, there was still quite a large expat population in Shanghai, so it was quite competitive. And we felt it was quite a strange situation with Kira being two and a half, having to go and do interviews for kindergartens to see if she was up to speed to get in, or see if we were up to speed to get in. And some of them very competitive. Now, I'm sure that does happen in the West as well, but maybe not quite to the same extent, I would say. So that was quite an interesting one early on. Um, but then I guess the other one you learn early, which is a good one, is that all the kindergartens were bilingual. So all the classes she was doing from, I mean, we started when she was only 18 months old, but she's going to bilingual classes right from the start. All the other kids there, most of the other kids there were from Chinese families. They were still looking for the same, a bilingual education. And it was important that we start her off as soon as we could with that to make sure she got that grounding in her languages. So I think that respect to it played very well, and I think that she did benefit from that.
I think just like you said, there are always pros and cons and in both of the education system. And what was the most rewarding aspect of your writing process for you to write these two books? And did this process also provide you with new insights and reflections on your own experiences in China?
I think so, particularly on the second one, because it's about our life having a child, and not to give too much away, but that wasn't an easy process. A lot of the early stuff of the book is just what we had to go through to uh, to have Kira, and in the end we were very lucky and we're very grateful for that. But it wasn't always a foregone conclusion that was going to happen. So you mentioned earlier about going back and rereading some of it. It's like it's quite a good memory then of just what we had to go through, and there's no complacency then about having children or being lucky. Like, it reminds me of how lucky we are. And then I think it was quite therapeutic for me. Like, having a child is one of the most emotionally roller coaster things you're probably ever going to face in your life. And as you know, then later on we had some other bad news come in and other things happen later. And one of the ways for me to deal with that was to write it down and to talk through. And this is what we had to do, and this is what I felt, and I could tell my side of it, because there was so much stuff going on at times that we just had to get through it in any way we could. It was just, let's make it to the end of this and get through, and then we can take stock and assess it later. And I think my way of assessing it and taking stock was to write it down and put my side of the story across, and so I can look back now and say, yeah, that's what we had to go through, and that's what I felt. And it was I did find it therapeutic to do that, and it was one of the reasons that drove me. And a couple of people have asked me about the books. It's like the second one in particular is much more personal and honest, and it's like people sort of look at it, it's like, did you really want to admit that? Do you really want to say that and put that out there in public? And it wasn't an easy decision. I did have some nerves about it, and I did stop and think a couple of times about what I was doing and how much I wanted to open up. But in the end, I wanted to tell that story, and I wanted, because I wanted to get out there what I'd been through and what those experiences were. So I think it was a valuable thing to do, to tell those stories in the end. So I was pleased that I did, but it wasn't it wasn't an easy decision, but I'm glad I went with it in the end.
Certainly, Ian, I read this book, and you really also shared your vulnerability in all kinds of phases. Yeah, your story really brought take people on this inner journey of yourself, and really connect with the reader. And at least I felt that, and I think it's so beautiful to read all of those personal stories. And also, you as an Englishman living in China went through all of those struggles, and with your family there, with your Chinese families. I can imagine you must have also struggled to decide what I should put in and what I should not, because how vulnerable I can be. But I think it's beautiful to share your vulnerability with the readers, with people. Thank you for writing this beautiful book, Ian. I really highly recommend people to go to read it, Ginger in Her Socks. Beautiful book, and people can buy it on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on all the main Amazon sites. Yeah.
Great. So, and I will put the name of the book and also the Amazon link in the podcast show notes. So if people are interested, they can go to get this book. And if we circle back to your professional life as a senior finance professional, you have lived in China since the end of 2008. And you have extensive financial and banking experiences in Europe and in Middle East and in China.
Mm.
How have you navigated the cultural differences in all of these regions and adapt your approach to your business?
I mean, I think the important thing when I came here was to be open-minded and to be curious. And it's not, you can't really come with preset mind about, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do it that way. So I had to be quite flexible and adaptable and get used to a very different way of life. I mean, one good example of this was when I was in Dubai. I ran a team of 6 or 7 people, I think, of which one guy was from India, one guy was from Pakistan, one lady was from Iran, one guy was from Brazil, and one lady was local Emirati. And with the best will in the world, they never stopped talking, never stopped talking. So all day, every day, it was great from a business perspective. I always knew everything that was going on, and they would tell me everything. The hardest part of the job there was just sometimes just to keep quiet and let them talk at me rather than because I wanted to go and do something else or not be bothered, but you have the patience to listen. But anyway, so I had that experience. And when I came here, I was heading up a team of about 25, I think, when I got here. So I thought, wow, big team. It's like an interesting challenge on the people side. And then first day I came in and I met everybody and introduced myself. And then I sat down at my desk. Complete silence. Complete silence. Everyone had said hello to me, and that was it. Then they just got on doing what they're doing, and no one spoke to me for about the first week. And it was quite a shock then to realize that maybe it's that thing in China about having the big boss, and you don't people weren't used to interacting so much. So I had to go and try and break down a few barriers and get people used to having me there. And it's like no, sorry, you can tell me what's going on. I want to know what's going on. You need to talk to me a bit more. So I had to really sort of push to build up those relationships with people and get them comfortable with interacting with me on a much more regular basis. So that was my first example of it right early on. So if I'd gone in expecting the same thing, I'd have been disappointed. So I think you have to be adaptable and flexible. And I make a lot of mistakes along the way, but the one thing I always try and do is look at mistakes and see what can I learn from this and what can I always told my team that it's like, I don't mind if you make a mistake, but I get annoyed if you make the same mistake twice. So find out what works, find out what doesn't work, and then adapt and learn from that. So that's always been my way of trying to work, and that's that I had to use that a lot. And as I said, I probably made quite a few mistakes along the way, but I learned a lot from those. So hopefully I came out better for it at the end.
So you also encourage your team just to dare to make mistakes and to take decisions. Are those the main tactics you used to overcome this first challenge when you were there?
I mean, I think also it was. I think once the team got to learn that I wasn't going to start screaming and shouting if I was upset, I wasn't like going to rant and rave about things going wrong, but it was a genuine desire to fix problems and to find solutions. And I think once they know there wasn't a recrimination, or I wasn't going to start jumping up and down on people, then that gave them some confidence. And I think one thing that's always important to me, wherever I've been, is to foster a very strong team spirit. I think it comes from the sport. So having played sport all my life, I'm very strong on teamwork. And a lot of big companies or corporate entities will always talk about teamwork and say it's important. But I think a lot of people don't really understand what that means or how it works or what they need to do to make it work. But I think that is something that I do take very seriously. And so I was quite lucky as well. The team I had when I first came here was quite young. It wasn't like I had a lot of very experienced people who'd seen it all before. I had quite a new and young team, and that helped. I could try and sort of set the culture a bit easier. So I really pushed the idea of teamwork and everyone working together as a unit, and we all lived and died on each other's successes as a unit. And I think once people bought into that, they really like that. So, and that helps drive some of the loyalty, and also it gives people confidence then to interact more. So I think those things help contribute.
Yes, very interesting. And this team spirit and to build team spirits. Ian, could you please also share your karaoke story? Because that also contributed, I think, a lot.
Talk about curiosity and adaptability. So, when I arrived here, I'd never done karaoke before I got here, and I'd always tried to avoid it. My singing is terrible, so it was always something I'd stayed clear of. And then when I arrived, so I have two teams in Shanghai and Beijing. So here in Shanghai, first few days, and the second week I got up to Beijing, they said, "Oh, we'll go out for dinner tonight." So great, okay, so go out for dinner, the whole team. And then they said, "Oh, let's go karaoke afterwards." I was like, "Oh, really? Are you sure?" It's like, "Yeah, we've got to go, we've got to go." So they go, and then a couple of people start singing, and they all start looking at me, and I realize that I can't get out of this. I'm going to have to do it. So I choose. I think I chose Yesterday by the Beatles because it's quite simple and it's only about a minute and a half long. So it's the shortest song I can think of. So uh, I sang it, not very well, but I sang it. And then at the end of the song, again, there wasn't much reaction. It was just like, right, who's on next? And I realized that they genuinely didn't care that my singing was terrible. They just wanted me to participate. And once I participated, it was fine. It was on to the next person. So that was quite a liberating experience then, because I realized that not really no one was listening. So after that, when I came back, then obviously Shanghai had heard straight away from Beijing, oh, he's been karaoke, so we've got to take him as well. So I had to do the whole thing again in Shanghai a few days later. And then I found I got used to it then. So I mean, my singing hasn't improved, but I've got a couple of songs that I do when I have to, and I could do one or two Chinese songs, and in a way that's a distraction then because people hear me sing the Chinese song and forget that I'm singing badly. Just it's the novelty value of hearing me do it. So and then it becomes quite social and you get into it, and it's quite fun. So I've sort of relaxed a bit on that over the years, I guess.
Ian, I think can we also give people this singing karaoke, building your repertoire, and as one of the tips to break the ice and to just engage with the team, build this team spirit because it can really help.
Well, I think in that case in particular, it would have been genuinely more harmful for me not to sing than to sing. It would have upset a lot of people and damaged that team spirit I was trying to build. So, um, however apprehensive you might be about it, then there is a downside if you don't do it as well. So I was much better off by doing what I did, I think.
Yeah, I think in Chinese culture, you build relationships with each other in social occasions, and
Yeah.
sometimes not really on business occasions. You just go out to chit chat and to engage with each other. Then you get to know each other. So this is the social occasions are also very very important for building your relationships in China for
Mm.
business. And if we look at your financial background, you worked in the finance area already for many years in China. Do you also see some key trends or changes in the industry in the last few years in this field?
Well, I mean, it's changed a lot. So when I was first living in Hong Kong, I started coming to China. So 2002, 2003, the market was just starting to open up and people were just starting to do business here. And no one was quite sure what it was going to be or what it was going to look like, but they could see that something was going to happen. And then 2004, 5, 6, it just went crazy. And all the Western companies coming in were doing as much business as they could possibly handle. And the bank I was in had two people to a desk because they couldn't get office space fast enough for the speed they were growing. And for that decade, yeah, people experienced huge growth, and that carried on. It survived the financial crisis in 2008. China came through pretty much unscathed. And then in the last decade, I think the market has matured a lot. So whereas before the growth was just because of the size of the market and new products are coming in, now it's a lot more like Western markets in that you have to fight and scrape for every piece of business and every share. You can't just turn up and expect to do well straight away. It's hugely more sophisticated and demanding, and it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do business in any industry now, but finance as much. So you have to have a really solid strategy and idea and clear marketing plan about who you want to be and why and how you can differentiate yourselves. And I think a lot of Western companies generally, not just banking, but in all industries, have struggled to do that. And there was a feeling for a while that because it's such a big market, you just got to turn up here and you'll make some money. And that doesn't work anymore. So it's really, what's your competitive advantage? How are you going to do things better than a local company? Because in 2002, 2003, when I started, not many people had the experience that I had. And that's why I was doing business here, and then why I got brought over in 2008, because no one had the experience to do that job. But that's not true now. Now everyone's got that extra 20 years of experience, and you're competing people with whose abilities and talents and experience is the same. So what are you going to do differently? Or how are you going to differentiate yourself? So it's much more competitive now, and the Chinese economy doesn't grow at the same speed that it used to. The business is harder, so that you have to really look for those opportunities where you can find them. I think the good thing here, compared to a lot of Western markets, I find is it still changes very quickly. So opportunities in China come and go very fast. So you have to be very agile, I would say. That that surprised me when I first arrived, and I'm a bit used to it now, is that how fast the market can change, how fast the economy can change, how much influence the government can have to take it in a different direction for whatever reason. So you have to be really nimble and be ready to make that move. But that also then gives opportunities. If you're in the right place at the right time and you can react fast enough, then you can find the business that you want to do.
If you look at the development in China, if we look at the technological development, do you also see certain innovations in the financial industry in China which are very different compared to Western countries or other countries?
The biggest one, if that is just the rise of the cashless systems and how everybody pays everything on WeChat and Alipay now. So even to the point that you see a beggar in the streets, they'll have a WeChat code on a card around their neck for paying. I mean, you could go a year without touching cash or a credit card here now. Now I know in the West as well, they're starting to go much more that way, but not to the level here. And what's interesting I've seen just this last month is that now all the COVID situation is finished, we're starting to see much more tourists or business people coming back into China. Now people are starting to travel in, and it's twice in the last month I've had people come in from Hong Kong, and they're like, "What do I do? How do I get around? I can't. How am I going to live? I don't have WeChat, or I don't have a credit card attached to it. I can't pay for anything. Am I in trouble when I come to China?" It's like, well, no, there are still ways and means, and it's not completely gone. But for people living here every day, it's just a completely digital system. And I think that we saw that as well in the COVID situation last year, not just during the lockdown, but how much that aspect of life was connected to your phone, and scan this to come in here, or you have the green code to do your test every second day, and you need a green code to get in and a green code to come here, and then if you go to another province, you have to sign up with a different app for them, and everything was completely digitized, and your phone was your life. And it's like, I used to joke with my wife, it's like saying the biggest risk we have during lockdown is if you drop your phone over your balcony, because you can't get another one because the shop's closed, but you can't go out because you haven't got the code. And your phone. I mean, people. I know everyone here is so reliant on phones already, or around the world is reliant on phones already. But there was a point, it's like it was even more extreme. It's like you cannot leave your house if you don't have a working phone. That was
Yeah.
this last year, and you cannot pay for anything if you don't have a working phone. So that's. I mean, you can argue whether that's a good thing or that's gone a bit too far, but that's the extreme I think it's moved to over the last few years. So that's definitely noticeable, I would say.
This digital cashless life is very convenient and makes everything very fast. And but at the same time, we also create a lot of dependency on technology, on internet. And if we look at our cultural differences and our strengths, and how what can we learn from each other?
I mean, I think much of my learning about China and Chinese people has come from being here and interacting on a daily basis. And I think it's very difficult to understand China without spending time here and getting to know people. And it worries me that over the last few years, relations between the West and China have taken quite a serious downturn. Maybe at its worst last year. I think things have picked up a little bit now, but um, both sides are sort of standing across from each other and no one's really interacting with each other. And I think the interaction is where you find common ground and understanding. And I think standing on a more aggressive basis and not interacting isn't going to work. I don't that that strategy is going to only cause more problems and more conflict. I think so. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of business is done across the dining table, or it's not done across a boardroom table. So coming here, interacting with people, seeing how they live, understanding what their drivers are, and then being able to react to that, I think is very important. If you try and do it from a distance, it doesn't work. You have to come and interact. And I think that applies both ways. I mean, China, the doors have been shut for the last 3 years. People couldn't come in. So now it's starting to change, people coming in again. And I think that should be encouraged. I think the more people that come in and they interact with people from overseas, the better it will be. I don't see a big appetite for that at the moment, unfortunately, and I hope that will change in the future. I hope that will be encouraged more, because a lot of foreigners who used to live in China have left. Tourists who used to come haven't come recently, and it will take some time for that to build up again. And if with anybody, if you leave them on their own and isolate them, then that relationship is going to suffer. So I'd like to see much more interaction and much more willingness here for people to come in and interact, and for China to learn from people from overseas as much as the other way around.
Thank you for sharing this really very important aspect of learning from each other and engage with each other. And Ian, do you also have some practical tips for the people who want to do business in China?
I mean, I think it's that you have to come and get on the ground here. You have to have a local team. You have to work out what your product differential is, and how are you going to stand out from the crowd, because it's a huge crowd. So what idea have you got that no one else has had, and how are you going to show people that you have that idea or that product? And I think you need people on the ground here to make sure that you can communicate that. Once you have that product and idea, how do you need people here who can talk to people who understand how to market an idea or a brand in China, or how to use Chinese social media, which of course is completely different to social media outside of China. The idea or the product can come from anywhere, but you need a team on the ground to be doing that and to do business in a Chinese way. And as we said, like, to do your deals across the dinner table or in the karaoke bar with the people you want to deal with. That's the only way it's going to work, I think.
Thank you very much for this tips. And Ian, really, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. And before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners, and anything else I didn't ask but you want to share?
I've been here a long time, and it feels like a second home to me now. So it was great this year that I could finally go back to the UK on holiday. I went on holiday in January, and that was great because I hadn't been home in 3 or 4 years. And it's a worry that, part of being an expat and living abroad, I'm sure it's something you feel as well. No, it's predicated on the fact that you can travel easily and move around quickly and conveniently. I could go home every year, or I could go and travel here or travel there. And having a couple of years where that wasn't possible was quite tough. And I'm glad it's come back now, and I'm very grateful to see it come back, and I hope we can hang on to it. So hopefully I'll be out and about a bit more and getting into more troubles and more stories. I think the only downside to finishing the second book was I've used up all my stories now. People ask me, "You're going to write a third one?" It's like, well, all I do is I write about the life that I have and the experiences I've had. I can't write fiction. This is the only thing I can write. So if I have more stories to tell, then I would happily tell them. But I've used them up now. So I'm hopefully, but my ambition now for the next few years is to get out and have more stories and more experiences that I can think about doing something else in future, because I've got stories to tell. So China's been amazing experience for me in providing those opportunities and those experiences far more than probably anywhere else I can imagine. So I just hope that continues, and I can keep having those experiences.
If I listen to you, that would be you are looking for new material and new books for your third book. I think
Yeah,
someday the third book will come, and if you get the chance to create more stories and adventures, and we will wait for your third book, I think.
thank you. Well, we'll see. It won't come soon, but that's in the long run. You never know. So we'll see.
Yeah, great. And how can people find you online and connect with you in?
I'm on all social media. So professionally, I'm on LinkedIn. Personally, I'm on Facebook and on Twitter at Ian in Shanghai, and I'm on Instagram as well as Ian Mote. So it's quite an advantage having a slightly unusual surname. So if you search for Mote, you'll usually find me. There's not many of us around.
Great. I will put all of your contact details and also the link for your books in the podcast show notes and the YouTube show notes. And really, I want to thank you for your time and for sharing your stories in China. And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, great. Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for listening to Our Cultures and Our World podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave a review on your podcast platform and share the podcast with other people. In this way, you will help me reach more listeners. By subscribing to this podcast on YouTube and other platforms, you will never miss an episode. I also love to hear from you. Please share your thoughts, questions, and feedback by sending email to mei@ibo.com, mei@iibboo.com, or connecting with me on LinkedIn or Instagram under MEIYANG. If you want to learn more about how I facilitate intercultural collaboration and the kindness projects I support, be sure to visit my website at ibo.com, iibboo.com. As a podcast dedicated to fostering cross-cultural connections, I believe that every story shared is a step towards a more united world. Thank you for supporting my mission and joining me on this journey.